And hey, welcome to Political Acumen. And appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to listen. Today's episode, my first episode, so it's kind of it is a big step, and I'm glad that you're taking part. The Democratic primary, Democratic in quotation marks, because is it democratic? Like, are we actually having a an election process that's transparent and accurate and timely and um, really taking advantage of the electorate and making sure that we're getting votes from different backgrounds and people from all walks of life that are in our country, that are citizens in our country, you know. So we'll start with the Iowa caucus, because that's the first state in the Democratic primary. It is a caucus, so it's a lot different than what Michigan is, which you walk in, you fill out your ballot, and that's your vote. In the caucus, it's people show up and they have to like vote by being there, standing in groups and talking to people and stating the case for their who they support. And so this year, the Iowa caucus, the polling and the Iowa caucus, kind of like the all eyes on Iowa, the gold standard of the Democratic primary process, and they implement an app called Shadow App, and this app is supposed to do all the things I mentioned: be transparent, be accurate, give us more information, make it a better democratic tool. Well, what we come to find out is that there's errors in the reporting. And so that's when we get all the delayed counts. It takes days to report. Polling doesn't show. Like, all this stuff is happening simultaneously for the first time in Iowa ever. And so, just to provide some context to what I look at and what I see and how I look at things, so that we can have a conversation, is this little piece here. So I'm going to play a little bit, and then we'll move to the next piece.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I don't think I'm paranoid, but just looking at the accumulation of facts, which grows larger every day, I'm starting to think there's a real effort, not in public, but behind the scenes, to prevent Bernie Sanders from getting the nomination by the Democratic establishment. Am I imagining that?
No.
You are not imagining that. No, you know what, Tucker, when I look at what's happening in the Democratic primary, and especially what just is happening right now in Iowa, what I think is not only is democracy alive, but it's thriving.
Sarcasm.
No, this is really, of course, this is the DNC. Right. By the way, they took over the counting of the votes. Did you know that they took over the counting of the votes? The DNC came in. Apparently, they don't have anybody who knows how to count stuff in Iowa, so they have to.
So what he's saying is that Tom Perez, the leader of the DNC, is now taking over the recount and all this other stuff. So, you know.
To have the DNC come in. I don't know if you know, the DNC rigged the last primary against Bernie Sanders. Yeah, so those are the same people who, and by the way, the same people who rigged the primary against Bernie last time are the ones involved in making this app, right? So they got a bunch of people who worked on Hillary's campaign that work now at Shadow, and they helped build this app. And all of a sudden, and you know what, here's the thing, Tucker, and you know, I've seen Glenn Greenwald make this point before, is that if these were honest mistakes, you would expect some of the mistakes to go in Bernie's favor and some of the mistakes to go in the DNC's favor. But all the mistakes are always going in the establishment's favor. So that's how you.
And what he's referring to basically is they're doing these recounts and comparing information and data from the app to the hard ballot, the paper ballots that they kept for this very reason. In every instance that's been reported thus far, the errors were a detriment to Bernie. So every mistake hurt him. And you would think, and anyone who knows statistics, like, that's an impossibility. It's an improbability that you would have 6, 8, 10 different people in the mix, and that every time that there's an error, it only is one person. That's not how it works.
That's how you know these aren't mistakes. This isn't. And by the way, when they release those, say, 62% of the vote, they're going to release those results. How did they decide to stop at 62%? Where's the transparency? Why did they pick those counties? How does it? There's no transparency. This is obviously, how are they going to cheat, Bernie? This is how they do it, because if you know what the headline was all day yesterday and today on cable news, and CNN and MSNBC, is Pete Buttigieg is in the lead. He's retaining his lead, and that's the story they want everybody to know, and that's what half the country now thinks, is that Pete Buttigieg won Iowa.
Yeah, and that's kind of my my point with this theory, that this is kind of an opinion part of what I'm trying to communicate today, is kind of what we can expect to see, or what I foresee we should expect to see for the rest of the primary leading up to the convention, is that you know, it's exactly what we saw in Iowa, but I feel like it's going to be done in various different ways. That we will, in New Hampshire, have issues. In the next state, South Carolina and Nevada, which is also a caucus, like, we're going to continue to see discrepancies. We're going to continue to hear or not hear reports on, definitely not on mainstream news, but hear reports of voter rolls being purged last minute, or times and places and locations of caucus sites being changed last minute. Like, anything that can be done to make it harder for people to get out and participate. And I think that the establishment Democrats, the people who have been in the party and the system at the highest levels, I'm not talking about citizen Democrats like me and other people. I'm talking about the leadership of the Democratic Party, the Tom Perez's, and the people that work with him and behind the scenes with him, those people. I think they are in panic mode because they don't want to lose their power. They don't want to lose the influence that they have, and they see Bernie Sanders as an absolute threat to that and everything else that they've grown accustomed to. And here's a little interview with Michael Moore after the Iowa debacle about that.
Block me, for Christ's sake, you know. I said, Tom, you and I need to talk. And, yeah. No. We need to talk. I'm coming to.
He's talking about Tom Perez. So Michael is after the caucus or after one of the interviews or what have you. He's trying to get his attention and talk to him, and Tom's trying not to talk to him.
DC, and we're going to talk, because you can't, you know, they took him away. You can't, the DNC can't screw this up. They have a moral responsibility to make sure that we remove Trump. And I am starting to detect from some of these DNC types that it's actually more important that they save their old corrupt system full of hacks. That's more important to them than getting rid of Trump. Anybody who puts anything ahead of when Hillary says that she doesn't know if she can endorse the candidate, meaning Bernie, then you've just told me something about yourself. And
yeah, so I think I didn't even cue that part up, and I let it play a little long, and that's interesting that he said that, but I didn't. But either way, like, yes, Clinton, yes, Obama, yes, you know, Perez, like, yes, all these people that still are in the party, have influence in the party, that get paid to speak for other people who are in the party, like, they're all in. And if Bernie gets elected, then that's going to change. It's going to change dramatically. So my theory long term is the Democratic Party is going to continue to make each of these states' primary elections have issues, whatever way they can. And unfortunately, what I think is a possibility is at the end of the primary, when they go to the convention, that somehow or another they're going to make it so that Bernie isn't the clear choice, that he isn't there's discrepancies, there's problems, and so they're going to rely on the second round, the super delegates that they said wouldn't be used. And then we're going to have the Democratic establishment doing exactly what they did in 2016. So now that's my opinion. That doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. That's just something that that I perceive based on the things that I listen to and how I look at our politics and world. Excuse me. So what I would like to see, since, the positive part of it, the things that I feel like, if things go well, I think what needs to happen is I believe that if the Democratic Party is truly desires to have unity, and people all over the spectrum are saying any blue will do, if Biden gets nominated, I'm voting for Biden. If Buttigieg gets whatever, we're gonna vote for this unity thing. Well, as the primaries roll and we start seeing information about interference from the establishment, then those candidates need to realize that they aren't the people's choice. They aren't the ones that are it's just status quo. And so they have to ask themselves, do you really want change? Do you really want to stand behind people that aren't really interested in change and are more interested in enriching themselves? Or is it time that the vast majority of Americans get some sort of help? And that involves the low polling candidates dropping out. They should drop out, and they should rally around Bernie. And I got a little ahead of myself. I had another clip right here. This was the clip about Tom Perez, so I'm going to back up for a second. I have to rewind in time. Maybe I can do a little edit on this, but this kind of personifies the whole idea about the establishment trying to interfere with Bernie.
I have yet another example of the DNC trying to screw over the will of the people, and yet again, they're not even hiding it. So before, what we just discussed was how Michael Bloomberg gave $300,000 to the National DNC. He gave $800,000 to the Democratic Grassroots Victory Fund, which is the DNC and the state parties. So over $1 million donation to the DNC. Boom, they change the debate rules and say, hey, you don't need an individual donation threshold anymore. We're getting rid of that. This is
they
an
can do whatever
attempt to
they
get
want.
Bloomberg on the debate stage so that they could try to kneecap Bernie. That's what this is. And they're so corporate and corrupt and disgusting, and it's transparent. But this story is perhaps even worse. It's perhaps even worse. DNC insiders plot return of superdelegates to stop Sanders at convention. In conversations on the sidelines of a DNC executive committee meeting and in telephone calls and texts in recent days, about a half dozen members have discussed the possibility of a policy reversal to ensure that so-called superdelegates can vote on the first ballot at the party's national convention. Such a move would increase the influence of DNC members of Congress, and other top party officials who now must wait until the second ballot to have their say if the convention is contested. Let me explain something to you. It's bad enough that superdelegates still exist on the second ballot.
Truth.
For them to be openly discussing, hey, this guy might run away with this thing, so what we have to do is get back to having superdelegates on the first ballot so we could steal it from him there. That is beyond brazen.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I think sometimes they do this so that we won't complain when they still screw us over. So they float these stories. This is just my opinion, but they float these stories and they say, "Oh, we're gonna put the superdelegates back on the first round ballot," and then all the progressives freak out. But then they don't really intend on doing it. They're gonna leave things the way they are, and then they're just gonna make what I said happen. They're going to say there's no clear winner. There's no, we need to have more. There's too much indecisiveness throughout the primary, so we need to go to the second round. And so then it kind of creates this whole like, oh well, it was still fair. Remember, they could have went back to the first round, but at least they kept their word. They'll play that card. Oh, we kept our word. I don't buy it. But it will mark my words, if that's how it goes down, there'll be a report at some point where Tom Perez will be like, well, we kept our word. We had talked about moving back to the first round, but we decided against it because we want democracy. We want transparency. They'll use these nuanced tactics to stand on later and tell us how perfect they are with their virtue signaling. But anyway, I digress. But that was the end of my point with the whole Democratic primary and kind of the rabbit hole of what the establishment could do to keep their power and not lose their grip on what they're doing, but then back with Bernie, like I really believe that he's the only guy that can beat Trump, and I think that he's done a pretty darn good job with his strategies and not attacking other party members. I think he does that to appeal to people that aren't like me, because I feel like that Bernie could be harder on some of the candidates and some of the things that they do that are completely within the scope of what he's against, because he talks about corporate greed and he talks about the rigged system, and then he says that Biden's his friend and Warren is his friend, and so I think that frustrates a lot of people. I'm one of those people, but I think when I look outside of the look at other people that care about that type of stuff, like it's kind of personified from the debate last night, that he said that people will support him when they were asked about how he can get stuff through Congress, and Biden comes over and gives him a hug, and I forget her name, says, that her and he had a bill passed. And, people say that Bernie isn't liked, but in all reality, he made a lot of amendments. He got a lot of things passed. He works across the aisle a lot. When you look at his record, a lot of amendments. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole about Bernie and my feelings on that. Like, that's your decision, who you vote for, what you find important. Our goal here is to discuss the facts, and I'll interject my opinion, and I'll let you know when that is. Like, I'm not trying to tell you how to think, just how I see things, and maybe bring up things that you don't see in mainstream media, because, a lot of this stuff isn't. I do think that every day that if you're watching the debates, watching the primaries, watching the states and the votes and all the stuff that goes down, every single state, if there's another issue or issues, this is, in my opinion, the Democratic establishment doing whatever they can to stop a Bernie Sanders presidency. And, that concerns me and kind of pisses me off. So hope you enjoyed the segment. I'm still learning. My voice is a little raspy today. I'm trying to drink a lot of water, but my throat is dry, and I'm not used to talking like this for extended periods, so I'll get better at that. I super appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to listen to my opinions, and I hope that people will want to participate and leave comments and topics and things that they want to talk about or learn more about, because that's why I'm here, is to help propagate that and hopefully help people understand what's going on in our society and our political system, and maybe we can come together and find ways to make our lives better and easier, frankly, like, more enjoyable and less stressful. So appreciate your time for sure, and let people know about this channel and what we're trying to do here. If you feel led to do so, I'd appreciate it. So guys, until next time, hone your acumen.